Alright you guys, so I've been asked a lot to do this video. I've been really putting it off because I don't feel like we can really compare these species, but let's just get into it. Which one is better, Retics or Burms? Alright you guys, so besides the fact that they're both large constrictors and they're both pythons, in my opinion that's about where the similarities of these two species end. Obviously their husbandry is fairly similar, which I would kind of beg to differ, and we'll get into that. But besides that, they're very different species. The reticulated python is a semi-arboreal species. Even as an adult, full-grown adults have been found way up in the trees, whereas the Burmese python is a very, ground-dwelling animal, preferring to hide under the brush, in the marshes, in the wetlands. That's where they're found, or even when they're found up in the mountains, they're deep in the brush. Unlike the reticulated python, which will be found, up in the trees or up on the cave walls. Their primary food sources in the wild are very different, with, a lot of, mainland retics in the wild being found, like I said, up in the trees feeding on a lot of birds, whereas a lot of larger, Burmese pythons in the wild are feeding on large mammals. So right there, we have very different species we're talking about already, and I see them compared so much in captivity, and I really feel it's a shame for both species. Because to answer your question just right out, neither species is better than the other. What do you like more, and why? I like Burmese pythons more, and I'm going to kind of tell you why right now. As far as size, let's just start off let's compare the size of the two animals, I guess. If we're going to do this comparison, let's go on a few different factors, okay? Let's compare their size. A mainland retic, on average in captivity, is going to be 16 to 20 foot. With some specimens being over 20 foot, don't get me wrong, but the average is around 16 to 20 foot. Most full-grown Burmese pythons are going to average around 14 to 16 foot. Some may be as low as 12, some might get up to 18. But, even on the larger end of the spectrum, let's say the largest end of the spectrum, okay? We're talking about an 18-foot Burm on a real big end of the spectrum, and let's say a 26-foot retic. Again, big end of the spectrum. We're talking about an 8-foot difference. So to me, that's still a pretty decent difference, right? And in my opinion, that's more the reason why we shouldn't be keeping mainland retics, at least full-grown adults, in enclosures like this. And I see it done all the time. I have my retic in a very similar enclosure. But, one, she's still a growing girl, and two, she's allowed out a lot to get exercise and to really work those muscles, work those organs, and get that energy out. We mentioned that they're a semi-arboreal species, even as adults. I feel like to properly really keep these mainland retics in captivity, we should have them in 8-foot by 4-foot by 6 or 8 foot tall enclosures, I plan on doing that for our girl. And, I just feel that's what's right because of their nature. They want to climb. And, there's nothing wrong with the guys who are keeping them like this, but I will just say, from what I've seen, a lot of the guys who are keeping them like this aren't letting these animals out daily or let alone on a weekly basis. Unless it's time to clean or take a bath, a lot of them aren't allowed to, roam and explore. Burmese python, I'm sure honestly they could probably care less if I pull them out, but I still do because I think that exercise and movement and, opportunity to not only interact for myself, but also for them to be inquisitive and interact with stuff around the room and really take everything in. I feel like that's very important. But besides that, honestly, they're very content in an 8 by 3 foot by 18 to 24 inch tall enclosure. As long as you're providing the proper temperature, a proper hot spot, fresh water, and feeding them properly and keeping them clean, they could really care less. But they're still puppy dogs 9 out of 10 times. And that's going to bring me on to the next topic. Let's talk about temperament. And obviously, okay, there's nightmares of both species and there's absolutely sweethearts of both species. But let's just go off one main point here. Male retics during breeding season are straight assholes, ask any retic breeder who's being straight up with you and not blowing smoke up your ass and is leading you in the right direction, male retics during breeding season are very defensive. They will buck you, they'll strike out of nowhere, and they're very temperamental. Male Burms aren't like that at all during breeding season. Like I said, there's exceptions to the rules, as far as either sex being a great dispositioned animal who's been, handled from a young age versus a ill-tempered animal who hasn't been handled properly since a young age or wasn't captive bred. But even captive bred, well-handled male retics during breeding season are little jerks. And, that's a lot of people aren't ready to properly handle that. I'm not saying nobody is, but a lot of people aren't ready to properly handle that animal and do it safely without getting hurt, I hate to bring it up, but look at a lot of the stuff we see about people getting hurt by large constrictors. Over half the time it's retics, and I hate that because, like I said, I really like both species. Even if I do love Burms the most, or I say they're my favorite species, everybody associates me as, the Burm guy or whatever. I do really love both species. I just think that, because of those reasons, the husbandry is fairly similar besides the enclosures, and that's my personal opinion from keeping both species. Just the factor of proper enclosure size, in my opinion, and the temperament of males during breeding season, that's what draws me to the Burmese python. Their disposition is, almost always, they're just sweethearts. They're great animals to work with. And those who say they're derpy or they're dumb, I beg to differ. I think these animals are very smart. They're very inquisitive. When I let them out, some of them, including this big granite girl right here beside me, who's actually paired with my, so she's a granite possible het albino green lab, and she's paired to my green double het albino granite right now, hoping for a last minute lock, but that's besides the point. She's a sweetheart. Anytime I'm in here, she's cruising the glass, and that's not to push or because she, is unhappy or anything. It's just she wants to, nose up, and so do a lot of the other Burms. I'm sure you'll see around me, Penelope behind me is doing it. It's because they're very inquisitive. Anytime I'm in the room, these guys are perked up, they're looking around, they're wondering what I'm doing. And when I let them out, some of them, like this girl, will follow me around the room almost. It's kind of weird. And I'm not one to, I can never pronounce the word properly, anthropomorphizing or something like that. You all can make fun of me in the comments below, whatever. But basically, what I'm saying is I'm not one to portray human emotions onto an animal that isn't necessarily capable of those emotions, at least on such a complex level as humans. But I do think they are capable of emotions, and I do think they're very inquisitive and very intelligent species, and that goes for both of them. They're just intelligent and inquisitive in different ways, and that goes a lot to, that goes a lot towards how they live in the wild. We interpretate the retics climbingness and want to be up and explore as smarter. We take it because their eye structure is different and their face structure is different, that is a smarter appearance. But really, after interacting with both, I'd beg to differ. I'd almost beg to say Burms are smarter, simply based on the fact that males still recognize that you're not, it's combative male during breeding season, and on top of that, at least from my experience, I go to feed the retic, or, in the past, my retics, a lot of the time they'd miss their food. They'd strike 2 or 3 times before they hit their food because they're just crazy excited about their food. Whereas even the Burms who are crazy excited about their food, they hit it right on target 99% of the time. So, I don't know, that's just my experience. I'm not saying one is smarter than the other. Honestly, I don't think we can compare them. So, this is just based on my experience. Like I said, overall, Burms stay a little bit smaller. They're, in my opinion, easier to manage and easier to properly house in captivity than reticulated pythons. And I just love the species overall, but I really do feel like we gotta stop comparing the two. It's not really a fair comparison. And also I feel like, mainland retics aren't really properly being portrayed in the hobby a lot of the time. And you know, I don't want to be associated with that, but I also don't want to be part of the problem. You know, and people could say the same for Burmese pythons, but I feel like it's much more responsible to, you know, for most people, I should say, to keep a Burmese python in captivity and do well and do right by that animal. So that's just my opinion on the subject. Like it or hate it, I've worked with both species for, you know, a number of years now, and on top of not only personally having them as my own animals for a few years, I've also worked with a number of these species on both sides in other people's collections, you know, growing up and over the last few years as well. And this is my opinion on the matter. So, you know, take it or leave it, love it or hate it. That's how I feel about it. That's why, in my opinion, Burmese pythons are a much better captive animal, but retics are still an amazing, beautiful species and should be respected as such. So I'm gonna wrap it up with that, you guys. Make sure, if you haven't already, go check out www.thesnakenerd.com. I'll leave the link in the description, as well as I'll prop it up on the screen somewhere around here. But you'll find links to all of our other social media accounts. You'll also find, you know, links to our available animals, as well as merch, both for D's Balls and Exotics and the Snake Nerd Lounge, which is our live stream we do every Saturday at 7 p.m. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do that. Do your boy a favor, smash that thumbs up button or the thumbs down for all I care. Either way, it helps us with the YouTube algorithm and lets us know whether you're liking this content and helps to promote our videos more. If you guys haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, smash the bell next to it so you get notified when we upload more content. And until next time, peace.